Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started then. Thank you so much for everybody's patience to the participants. And I want to especially thank these participants who stepped in to do this workshop at the last minute after we had cancellations from our other presenters. But what they're talking about today is going to be really important. As you know, our government is focused on war and producing munitions. And what they're going to be talking to you a little bit about today is some of that, the impacts of those munitions on our communities on many levels. So I am going to let them each introduce themselves. My name is Anita Rios. Let me just say that. I'm from the Ohio Green Party. I'm a former co-chair of the Green Party of the United States. And, I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And I'm going to just give it over to the panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And I believe I'm starting with Darren.
Hello, everybody. My name is Darren Brewing. I am with the No Ohio Anduril plant here in Columbus, also representing Veterans for Peace, Chapter 183. Just kind of got my start after they announced a Anduril plant here in Central Ohio, but we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Var.
Hello, everyone. My name is Var. I am from Seattle, and I am with Seattle Anti-Imperialists for Palestine. As our name might imply, we are a group of activists who are in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle, and a lot of our work revolves around uplifting and connecting Seattle with the Palestine cause, and also linking it to other anti-imperialist efforts. We're here, or I'm here, because Anduril is also kind of in Seattle. So I'll talk more about that in a sec.
Tala.
Yeah.
Cool. Hi y'all. My name is Tala. I'm part of the Philippine-US Solidarity Organization based in Long Beach, California, and we are also part of ITRIP, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. We're a solidarity network of different organizations and individuals, really campaigning for human rights and just and lasting peace in the Philippines. So really excited to be here and happy that y'all are having us present. So I'll pass it to Pat.
Pat, you're muted. You're still, okay, good.
Okay. I'm from Columbus in Central Ohio. I'm Pat Morita. I became an anti-nuclear activist in 1981 when I joined the Ohio Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign. For 10 years, I chaired the Ohio Sierra Club's Nuclear Free Committee. And in 2020, I was a founding member of the Ohio Nuclear Free Network, where I now serve as a coordinator.
Thank you to you all. I think Darren's presentation is going to go first.
Yep, I will start sharing my screen. Here we go. All right. So obviously we're here today to talk about Anduril, and what we kind of call the AI war machine. I'm just gonna get right into it. So what is the AI war machine? It is kind of the next evolution of what warfare, what the type of warfare that they are trying to get, the warfare of the future, if you will. So traditional warfare kind of has depends heavily on human operators and chains of command. You have your typical defense contractors, your Lockheed Martins, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman's, and they are the ones producing fighter jets, tanks, aircraft carriers, all that good stuff. Their major emphasis is on hardware, slow procurement, and large industrial supply chains and scarcity. For an example, a fighter jet platform may remain active for 30 to 50 years. AI warfare, what it's kind of speculated to look like, and from everything that we've kind of seen so far, those systems can operate semi-autonomously or completely autonomously, no human operator required. And so some of the defense contractors that are AI focused have been Anduril that we'll talk about today, a little bit about Palantir as well, but you also have Shield AI and Skydio. So yeah, these are the ones that are developing the autonomous drones, AI targeting systems, surveillance algorithms, all that good stuff. And their main emphasis, rather than having these really beefy tanks, is the software that operates all these really cheap drones. So instead of having a very robust tank that lasts 30 to 50 years or fighter jet, they're only expecting these drones to be used for maybe 10 or 15 years, if that. So less than half the lifespan. I would be surprised, and very disposable. I think we can kind of see in Ukraine what's going on there. A lot of the drones are basically little like mini bombs that they're just sending out. So they're not expecting to recover these drones either. So kind of behind this AI war machine that we're going to be talking about, one aspect of it, there's this unholy trinity of making J.R.R. Tolkien roll in his grave, because they all are based off of objects in Lord of the Rings. So the first company is Palantir. If you haven't heard of that, it's basically surveillance and data collection company. Anduril, what is the weapon side of things. Again, they're doing AI drones. And then Erebor is basically how they're hoarding all of their wealth for themselves. Each of these companies is backed in some way, shape, or form by Peter Thiel's founder fund as well. And it's all kinds of craziness. All right, so real brief summary on Palantir, if you haven't heard of them. They got started shortly after 9/11 in 2003. They created surveillance software to track terrorists, including facial recognition software, and pretty much any three-letter agency for the U.S. government uses Palantir's software. They used to have like individual databases. Now Palantir kind of condensed their databases into one. So Alex Karp, it was kind of like handpicked by Peter Thiel to run Palantir. And a couple months ago, he released like a 22, 23 point kind of manifesto. They're all crazy to some degree, but really there's going to be like 4 different points I'm going to talk or mention. His 5th bullet point was basically that it's not a question whether AI weapons will be built, it's who's going to build them and for what purpose. And then his 12th point, kind of tying into that, he claims that the atomic age is ending, that nuclear deterrence is no longer enough, that AI deterrence is kind of the next step in what the age of deterrence is going to look like. He also mentioned that the post-war neutering of Germany and Japan must be undone. I don't know if you know this, but they were kind of the bad guys. We probably should have, done more, if anything. I think it's really ironic. His 18th point is that the ruthless exposure of private lives of public figures, it drives people from government service. So he's allowed to surveil everybody, but we can't, keep tabs on them at all. And then finally, probably the most racist point of like who's behind all this. He claims that some cultures have produced vital advances while others remain dysfunctional and regressive, whatever that's supposed to mean. So that's kind of who Palantir is. And so we'll move on to Anduril. So Anduril is defense tech, building artificial intelligence-powered military and security systems, founded by Palmer Luckey and Trey Stevens in 2017. And their stated goal is to modernize defense systems using software, autonomy, robotics, and artificial intelligence, rather than relying mainly on traditional military hardware. So the weapons platform isn't necessarily the big thing. It's how those weapons get deployed, the software behind it that they are really betting on at this point. So just a couple pictures of the drones. So up in the upper left here, you have the Ghost. It's basically a recon drone, flies super high in the sky, unmanned. So it just collects data all over. It's like a flock hammer in the sky, if you're familiar with flock. The Roadrunner is like an anti-drone drone. So you see some similar things being used in Ukraine, where like it's drone-on-drone warfare. So this is their product for that. The Fury drone is what's going to be built here in Columbus, or south of Columbus, and it's an unmanned fighter jet. So instead of like Tom Cruise, flying, being cool in Top Gun, you just basically have a computer flying it instead. And then finally, we'll I think Var's going to touch on these a little bit more. They have their dive submarines that, once again, no people inside, strictly controlled through AI. Also going to be developing, their own missiles, proprietary missiles. I'm sure that will, can get launched from essentially anywhere once they're deployed. I think that there is some plans to be building those here in Central Ohio too. So they have their own proprietary AI network or model called Lattice OS, and instead of one operator controlling one drone, you have one operator essentially controlling an entire fleet of drones. So whenever you basically just say, "Hey, attack this," and that whole fleet just kind of figures it out using AI. How it's going to determine what's a valid target or not, that's a whole other thing. But I think that's kind of one of the biggest, fears of, letting AI choose when to pull the trigger. Of course, they say that the human stays in the loop per se, but how much in the loop is always that question. All right, so to get to know some of the people that are behind Anduril, first off, you have Trey Stevens. He's an Ohio boy. He was a high school senior when 9/11 happened and decided to basically go into defense right away. So he went to Georgetown University. He worked for the DoD and built enterprise solutions to Arabic, Persian name matching, and data enrichment, whatever the hell that means. Essentially, he was collecting databases or basically doing Palantir stuff, collecting data and putting them into databases of just Arab-sounding names, effectively is what it was. It was, again, a very racist thing. He did start working at Palantir in 2008, quickly rose up, and then met Peter Thiel and became a part of his kind of inner circle. So in 2017, Peter basically asked him, like, "Hey, do you want to go build this AI defense company with Palmer Luckey?" I'm going to touch on him here in a bit. And Trey is, I don't know how to word this right. He's a Christian, or he calls himself a Christian, and he does all these like weird talks about how technology and theology kind of intersect and everything. But it feels like kind of a money thing because it's only to like rich and powerful people that he talks to. All right, so Palmer Luckey. This is kind of the first thing that I recognized when Anduril first came up. He got to start with VR. I'm still a big nerd, so that name sounded familiar. I'm like, yeah, he was doing the Oculus thing. His company got bought by Facebook, and then he was let go because he donated to Donald Trump's campaign in like 2015 before it was cool. Transitioned to weapons. He has stated before that he knows AI is going to kill innocent people with his own products. He is a huge fan of ICE and has some like white replacement adjacent statements, which is basically this tweet on the right side here. He's a self-described radical Zionist, regularly meets with Israeli leadership. And then I think he was in an interview with Joe Rogan where he says that he wants to transition America from a police state into the world's arms dealer instead. So that's kind of his background. And finally, this third piece of this unholy trifecta is Erebor. If anyone remembers Silicon Valley Bank in California from a couple years ago, this is kind of the next evolution of that. It's also getting started here in Columbus, and it's a crypto bank. They have this direct national charter, which basically means that they don't need to get a license from each individual state. This bank is not open to the public. You basically need to have an in already in order to have an account there. So, and that is Erebor itself. And so now we're kind of going to get into what's happening here in Central Ohio. So back in January 2025, they announced that they were building a 5 million square foot facility called Arsenal One, and it's just located just south of Rickenbacker International Airport, where they also have an Air National Guard base. So these were all the different promises they made, and they're pretty much all BS. So they're promising more than 4,000 workers. Anduril has a really bad track record of importing workers, not really giving those jobs to the people that already live there. but basically taking them from either California or wherever some of their other facilities are located and moving them to or to Central Ohio to work at this facility. So a little bit more about it. Got announced in January, and then in August of 2025, they decided to sponsor OSU athletics right before football season started, so that they got their name in the horseshoe and everything. So why they chose Columbus? Obviously, it's right next to Rickenbacker. That airport there, they're going to use that for testing their drones as well, because they have that big runway. It's also relatively close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Some of the history they have, so the locals of Pickaway County, basically they kind of caught wind of what was happening here, and they're like, wait a minute, this there's farmland right next to it. Like, God forbid what happens if, there's a malfunction, a drone crashes into it. So they try to kind of shut it down at the zoning level. But we kind of found through some FOIAs that they had to lobby directly to the Ohio State House in order to shut down citizen referendums on quote unquote mega projects. So that includes like any type of data center that wants to go up, any type of, nuclear facility that wants to go up. Those are all considered mega projects, even though there's no real definition. However, they got promised a 30-year tax abatement for the entire project. So for the next 30 years, the state is not going to get any tax revenue from any of the property tax of a 5 million square foot facility. So we're not getting any money for that. However, there was a small carve out made for a local school district that basically promised to train their students to work at this facility. So kind of a quid pro quo there. One of the buildings that they purchased on this plot of land already existed. It was a warehouse. They've already kind of refit in order to start manufacturing some of the drones, which I think that they have already started working out of that facility, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean we can't still, fight and make it very, very difficult for them to operate here. There's been so very little regulations put in place from local governments regarding the test flights, or like, again, God forbid there be an accident somewhere on what type of, stipulations need to be made on that front. And I believe from there, I'm going to hand it over to Var.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Okay, so Anduril is coming out with a lot of messaging about rebuilding the arsenal or rebooting the arsenal of democracy. They have a wonderfully terrible article on their website that I would recommend anyone who is finding this really aggravating to go and read through. It's kind of crazy how blatantly they just put out their ethos. But they spend a lot of time highlighting how there is this huge supposed threat by Russia, China, and other non-state actors. They really they really use the supposed threat that these other entities play as a reason to justify like why the US military needs to be revamped. And that's basically their entire selling point, which is that the US and just military is out of date, pay us money, we'll revamp it for you. And they come out with a lot of this messaging, like we must restore the balance of power to try to sell that narrative. And unsurprisingly, they spent a lot of time focusing on China. So this specific graphic from them is really highlighting how China has been building significantly more ships than the United States. The United States does not really build ships anywhere near the scale it used to in World War II. And Anduril is clearly highlighting this as like a cause that they think is problematic from the U.S. national interest and one that they are like interested in. Next slide. This brings me to why am I here? What is Anduril doing in Seattle? Next slide, please. So yeah, they are building warships. They are putting out this advertisement and be like, we need to counter China's building of warships. Pay us because we're going to start building warships. So very recently, it became public that Anduril's efforts were leaning towards building these autonomous surface vessels. I think what Darren highlighted earlier is they already have a history of building submarines, but these are actually a little bit different. These are like if you think of like a proper warship that you might have seen in like World War II. Basically, what you see on the left here, it looks like what you'd imagine of like a ship for war. But the main thing that Anduril is selling, like they do with all of their products, is taking people out of it, making this completely autonomous, having it controlled by, honestly, mostly their lattice software. So they just send the ship direction and it goes there. And they intend to build this in the city of Seattle. On the right is the shipyard that was previously owned by a different company called the Foss Shipyard that Anduril has bought and is renting as of recently is planning to open up shop and build the first set of these ships, test them, and then build the rest of them in Seattle. Next slide. So why Seattle and why are they building autonomous surface vehicles? I think we kind of highlighted, or I kind of tried to highlight earlier that like Anduril sees itself as, or sells itself as like a revampment and innovation on the U.S. military process. And it's shown that like it views there being a necessity in us having a naval fleet. To quote them, the Navy needs autonomous, modular vessels that can be produced at speed, deployed in volume, and upgraded continuously with iterative engineering, software updates, and new mission payloads to augment manned fleet. So they clearly believe that like there's going to be use for the U.S. military to project naval marine power, and like we're seeing across the board, they believe it's more efficient to do that without people involved. Obviously, I think we can all see that there isn't really a need for us to be developing more and more U.S. military efforts and spending more of our resources on that than caring about our own citizens. But clearly, Anduril believes that like this is crucial. And they've chosen Seattle because Seattle has a long history of shipbuilding. Kind of like what Darren said is like they're picking like locations that are strategic to leverage like different things like infrastructure, supply chain, and labor. But yeah, and the one thing I wanted to highlight is like Anduril is a relatively new company. It's not super well known, but they're expanding very, very fast. And we only like heard about this effort from Anduril about like six-ish, like that's when it, I think first came public, and they moved in like 2-ish months ago. So they are growing and they are moving fast. And I think one of the things that we're highlighting here is that like they could be growing into your neighborhood too. Next slide. Yeah, on that note about neighborhoods, the little red marker in the middle there, that is the supposed planned spot for Anduril's next site. I don't know if anybody here has been to Seattle. If you haven't, you should come visit. It's lovely this time of year. But this is like very centrally located in the city. This blue box there is like a residential neighborhood that like is steps away from where they're building these warships. 5 to 10 minutes walk away is Seattle Pacific University, a place where a lot of people are going to school. This actual site is, oh, that's awesome. No way. Cool. This site is on the ship canal, and on the ship canal in the yellow box is downtown Ballard, which is like one of the main places, like the densely populated city area of Seattle. I have a photo in there of like the farmers market. It's the biggest farmers market in the city. And then further along is the Ballard locks. These are like locks that ships go up to get into higher waterways. It also has a salmon ladder that is a lovely attraction. If you're ever in Seattle, come check it out. It's probably one of the best known like spots to go visit, and I think something that highlights what's great about Seattle. and there's a bunch of things that aren't shown in this as well, but like this is my effort to highlight like how central Anduril's plan is to build warships in the city of Seattle. They want to do it right in the middle. Um, and obviously, we think that's not okay. That we don't really think they should be building warships in the first place, and I don't really want them building them in my backyard. Next slide. And besides the fact that like they shouldn't be doing this in the first place, that this is wrong, we should be spending our money and our nation's resources doing other things. Um, doing the work that they plan on doing has a lot of negative impacts. So between 2011 and 2014, there was 23,000 pounds of xylene that were released from the Foss shipyard, the previous ship owner. But we have information that shows that the Foss shipyard has a long history of generating hazardous waste. And I think this is just true of shipbuilding in general, and especially of weapons manufacturing. I think many of us probably know that that is an environmentally negative process. So we really see that like this effort in building in the shipyard is going to lead to some serious negative consequences for this waterway and probably the people living around it. And yet there was no environmental impact assessment done on Anduril's arrival. They were kind of just like, yeah, Seattle's like, you guys can come in here. No problem. Next slide. And besides just like polluting the waterway right there, this path that they are on is on the main migration route of three of the most common forms of salmon in the Puget Sound. So all of the salmon transitions this long journey, and like the plant is going to be basically right at the end. And obviously, like that's going to have a big impact on the salmon populations, and not only just them, but um, the indigenous communities in the Seattle area that have constantly been sidelined and care for deeply the salmon population. So we see that like Anduril's presence and arrival here has many many impacts in different parts of our city and community. Next slide. Yeah, so to summarize, Anduril is growing in Seattle, and it's using the city and its natural resources to produce weapons. We may just be one of the first that Anduril is spreading to, but I think it's important that the Green Party and its members here, like, think about Anduril, hear about them, keep them in the news, and if you see them, like, try to think about ways to stop them because they're trying to be the cutting edge of the U.S. military, and they're growing fast, and we need to work together to keep them out. So we're hoping to get Anduril out of Seattle. And yeah, I'm talking about Anduril, which in Seattle, which is like the newest place it's coming to, but I'm going to pass it along to Tala, who is kind of talking about Anduril kind of in their home turf.
Well, thanks y'all. So yeah, again, I'm Tala from the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, and I'm joining from Long Beach. So I really want to start off with Anduril's role in the greater Southern California area. As you could see in this map, not as pretty as as Vars, but what you could see actually is there are many different places across Southern California that Anduril is functioning out of. So if you start in Orange County, which is the dots right below the A, that is actually where the headquarters exists in Costa Mesa, where they have their software team, their research and development. They even have flight test engineers, hardware engineers, etc. And that is really the brain of Anduril. So the development of the Arsenal One, what's happening in Seattle, and then the developments that are also happening across Southern California and really across the world. A lot of it is coming from Costa Mesa, which is this small coastal town, and it's very unassuming. And so what you could actually see is that not only is it based out of Costa Mesa, but it's also Anduril's workers or recruiters are going to different universities. So University of California in Irvine, California State University, Long Beach, and other schools nearby its spaces to actually recruit students, particularly students in STEM and engineering, to work for Anduril. And they're trying to frame it as a fun, new, exciting job, not like other engineering jobs. However, it strays away from actually exposing the impacts of Anduril that folks have talked about extensively already, and the ways that it'll affect the communities that these students are coming from. And so this is what's happening in Costa Mesa. If you go a little bit north to where that A point is, that is Long Beach, where I'm at. And so Rex Richardson, our mayor, recently was celebrating the development of Anduril joining our Space Speech Initiative. And so essentially this Space Speech Initiative, which includes other aerospace manufacturers and corporations, like Divergent, which is a missile frame factory, or Voyager that creates missiles and develops more materials for AI warfare, is really a continuation of, similar to what Var was sharing about Seattle's legacy of shipbuilding. This Space Beach Initiative is a continuation of Long Beach's history in aerospace development, going all the way back to World War II, which is really what Long Beach prides itself on. And so, and for example, Boeing has a major presence in Long Beach, which has really been normalized, right? Despite its major contributions to US war and US aggression in other countries. And so that's what's happening in Long Beach. The city, similar to what's happening in Ohio, is celebrating. It's bringing in all of these jobs, all of this investment and opportunity. But in reality, what's happening is that these engineers, these researchers are coming in from areas outside of Long Beach, which is already a very impacted, very dense community, and is going to contribute to, as real estate developers have really applauded, contributing to the increase of housing costs. It will, eviction is already on the rise because we're preparing for the 2020 Olympics. And so many communities, working class communities especially, will be displaced because of the impacts that Anduril is bringing to the city. And the impacts also including the development and manufacturing of these drones and these surveillance weapons, that is not going to benefit the people of Long Beach and the people of the world, but will really continue to benefit the interests of the US in maintaining its power over global South countries. And so to build off of that, Darren spoke a little bit about Palmer Luckey and his view on immigrants, and actually really openly sharing sentiments, naming the presence of immigrants and migrants being a threat to democracy. And so the other thing that Anduril creates that is present at the US-Mexico border, so just down south, at that B point, is the Sentry Towers, which are responsible for the surveillance of migrants who are trying to cross the border, trying to cross the border from Mexico, from Central America, and from other countries, for as an attempt to come to the US, find work, find livelihood, find better opportunities for their families and themselves. And so not only is Anduril being deployed outside of the US, but it's even being deployed internally here as well. So I'm going to move north from San Diego all the way to that last point, the red dot, the San Fernando Valley. This is the Edwards Air Force Base, where we have seen the testing of autonomous aircrafts on that base by Anduril. And so, I think common sentiments of California, Southern California, is that it's very progressive. It's a space where people could be who they are, but in reality, that's actually not true. What we see is that California, especially Southern California, serves as a launching pad for war. And it's not only because in San Diego, there's the major Navy bases that are there that are present, that ships out the USS Abraham that went straight to Iran, or other ships that go to other countries for war exercises. For the folks are familiar with the Rim of the Pacific war exercises that are happening currently. That is not the only launching pad for war that Southern California has, but because of the expansion of these military manufacturers, like Anduril, um, like Palantir even, Divergent, etc. The development and the manufacturing of these weapons is another way that Southern California, and California as a whole, Governor Newsom has applauded Anduril's presence and expansion in Long Beach. This is another form of serving as a launching pad for war. And so the engineers or the technicians and the workers that are being targeted to work at these sites are also working there, maybe unknowingly, of what the things that they are contributing to are how they are affecting global South communities, because of the propaganda that Andrew is also responsible for creating. No, however, I will not disregard the blatant fascism and the disconnect of Anduril's own CEOs and leaders from the experiences of the majority of the people, working class communities, youth, students, etc. And so that's really the significance of SoCal, is that it's not just where I'm based in Long Beach, it's really all throughout this region that Anduril is expanding its testing, its developments, and its manufacturing, to really serve as a pawn of the US. And so if you go to the next slide, I really want to emphasize, as part of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, it's really important for us to also understand what is happening internationally and what is the role of Anduril, particular for me in the Philippines. And so Palmer Luckey, we've named him so many times, has really named and uplifted himself as someone who is trying to protect Taiwan from China, or who is trying to really be on the side of the US when war breaks out between the US and China. And so this Anduril's China 27 plan is really this plan that guides the direction of Anduril, its development of surveillance drones and weapons that will prepare the US for war. And so really just showing that these issues are not only related to our local communities in the US, but really to the international community that's impacted by the US's attempt to maintain its power in global South communities. So the Philippines, for example, is where I'll give focus on, where it really serves as a testing ground for war games. Anduril has really tests its Ghost X drones in the Philippines, through these war exercises called Balikatan and Salaknib, which happen every year, and bring in more and more US troops to train the armed forces of the Philippines, to be prepared for the outbreak of war and to be prepared for supposed attacks of China on the Philippines, because the US continues to expand its military presence and its bases in the Philippines, to really continue to instigate and provoke war between the US and China. And so it's really the Philippines that will serve as a first line of fire when this war breaks out. For example, in the most recent Balikatan or shoulder-to-shoulder military exercises, the US launched a Tomahawk missile. in the Philippines, from a civilian airport to another area in the Philippines, just to show its brute power in being able to launch a missile that could hit China if it were to escalate in that way. And it's the same missile that was launched in Iran. The same missile that targeted a girls' school and killed so many children, because of the US's ongoing and intensifying fascist attacks. Um, and so what this shows is that because of the presence of the US, because of Anduril's involvement in these war exercises, that the Philippines will really be the first line of fire. Um, and so it's not just through war, it's not just through these weapons that are being developed, or these corporations individually that are putting a target on the Philippines that is really filling the pockets of Anduril executives, but it's also different neo-colonial projects. For example, Pax Silica, or Peace Silicon, is a major project that is spearheaded by the US. The first country that signed on to this development is Israel. And it also includes countries like UK, Japan, UAE, India, and some others. And this formation, or the project, essentially will contribute to the expansion of AI supply chains through critical mineral mining and semiconductor manufacturing. And so, while this, if you look it up, read what the US is saying about it, it's supposedly aimed to reduce reliance on single countries for the supply chain. But in actuality, it will rely on the Philippines for its natural resources, contribute to the displacement of farmer and indigenous communities. It will intensify the environmental destruction, worker exploitation that really strips the people from its livelihood. And I'm sure we could also see similar and also just horrible disregard for workers' rights, even for the workers that are here in the US working for Anduril. Um, and so this is significant to note. Maybe it's not clear what the connections are, but Anduril and the development of AI warfare would not be able to expand and operate at the same level that it is without the Pax Silica initiative. We're actually already seeing investments and spin-off companies, I would say, of Anduril, for example, like Valor, which is a nuclear energy corporation that is setting up base in Pax Silica, developing nuclear farms, untested nuclear farms in Pax Silica, actually in Philippine universities even, that could heavily affect the community surrounding it. However, Anduril and these other corporations are investing in Valor because it will give them unlimited energy and to maintain these AI data centers and the energy levels needed to keep up the demand or for AI development. So I'll pause there. That was actually the bulk of my part, so I'll go ahead and pass it to Pat.
Okay, hi. So I've introduced myself. I want to say that Ohio Nuclear Free Network, they've been focusing on Anduril since it was first announced here in Central Ohio in January of 2025. So far, the state of Ohio has given them $1 billion in subsidies, over $1 billion just from our state, including tax abatements. They also have factories in Georgia, Mississippi, Rhode Island, London, and Australia. So they're really expanding worldwide. Next slide. Let's see. Okay. So Anita wanted me to make the connection between Anduril and the expanding network of militarism in Ohio, and particularly the longstanding exploitation of low-income people in Appalachia, as deadly radioactivity goes along with their labor-intensive jobs. So several of us in our network have been opposing uranium enrichment at the Department of Energy's Portsmouth nuclear site in Piketon in southern Ohio since the 1980s. Let's see. That's where they enriched uranium for nuclear weapons for over 50 years. The site there in the photo is the 3 buildings cover 100 acres under roof. At the time, the largest buildings in the world. The entire site is about 4,000 acres. This factory used as much electricity, they bragged, as much electricity as New York City. They built 2 coal plants to supply the electricity. One of them was in Indiana. They brought in, the worst thing they did was bring in high-level nuclear waste, and they ran it through all the process buildings, all those 3 giant buildings. And that has contaminated the entire site and far beyond with transuranics. And that is now being dismantled. Okay. Next slide, please. Slide, please. This is my last slide. The 3 large process buildings are now being dismantled. The so-called cleanup is being done uncovered, which is further spreading radioactivity into Pike County, several counties beyond. Highly radioactive material is being buried there just above the huge Taze River aquifer. Off-site testing funded by the Department of Energy found radioactivity in fish and garden produce off-site. Their solution, well, that's for people, just don't eat those things. So that's what they're doing about it. Our network hired epidemiologist Joe Mangano, who found that the premature death rate in Pike County went from 12% below the national average in 1950 to double the national average in 2024. So current operations at ports are almost fully subsidized by taxpayers, in some cases by venture capital. New centrifuge enrichment. Although the Department of Energy claims that this, let's see, what slide are we on? Okay. Okay, yeah. The Department of Energy claims that this new enrichment is only for commercial use. It can be easily further enriched for nuclear bombs. So this completes the Ohio triad between Anduril, which makes drones, and the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, where bombs of various types will likely be added to Anduril's drones. So deconversion is good because it takes the fluorine off the uranium, and that makes it less chemically reactive. But unfortunately, depleted uranium is used for warfare in shells and tanks. 16 small reactors are being planned by Oklo, and the hydrogen is, thankfully, that's not funded. But please be aware of 2 things. Most hydrogen comes from breaking down natural gas, and there are very few sustainable uses for hydrogen. So the mega site being proposed, first of all, well, they just announced it less than a month ago. $33 billion gas plant would generate 9.2 gigawatts of electricity, and a 10 gigawatt data center would be powered by this gas plant. And by comparison, Ohio now uses an average of about 30 gigawatts of electricity. So you can see my graphic there about what this will do for global warming. So, and then the arrow points to where this Pike County is, where the Portsmouth nuclear site is located. So I'll finish with that, and thank you all very much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I think we, Okay, so this is information on the various organizations who are represented in this presentation. And I think it's really important for us as Greens because, you know, every time we run candidates, every time we do campaigns, we are part of communities where we care about these things and we speak out about them. We don't brush them under the rug. We always confront them. And that is a big, important part of all of our campaigns. And so I would say in particular, if anybody's running for office in one of these areas, please be in contact with these groups, partner with them. These are people who are doing very important and really good work. Did you all, the panelists, I think we have just a few minutes. Did you all want to go ahead and revert to the questions that had been prepared beforehand?
Yeah, if we could just do probably the one question, why the US is interested, and then we can all just give an answer on that.
Okay, so why is the US interested in funding Anduril? Any of the panelists who want to respond to that?
Sure, I'll take a stab. So effectively, I mean, Anduril is kind of what they see as that next step in the U.S. war machine as well. But not just, the U.S. war machine, but AI war machine, as we aptly named it. They are taking kind of a different approach of how they are, kind of marketing their weapons to. It used to be, Lockheed Martin talks with the Air Force. They talk, the Air Force kind of gives them feedback like, hey, here's what we want. But Anduril's kind of flipping that on its head a little bit, where they're developing the products and then just saying, hey, Air Force, how many of these do you want? And they're not just doing that to the U.S. Air Force, but I'm sure other military, other militaries overseas. I think, as I kind of mentioned, the unholy trifecta of, Palantir and Anduril and Erebor. I think having if I didn't mention it, Erebor was also started by Palmer Luckey. So I think having the head of a defense contractor working or also being the head of a crypto bank where it's very difficult to track where that money is coming and going can, with no real oversight, can only lead to bad outcomes because we don't know if these weapons are getting sold to CIA, front groups overseas, to Israel. Like it's hard to track where these weapons or the money's going.
Thank you, Darren. Just one last thing and one last question for the panelists and what are communities doing to fight back? You talked some about that, but if you could just address that.
I could start. Upon researching Anduril's expansion in Long Beach, what we actually had started to do, or what we have actually launched, is our Anduril Out of SoCal Coalition. So we've been able to, my organization, as part of iChirp, we're also part of the International League for People's Struggle and work very closely with other anti-imperialist organizations. And we've been able to really link together to bring our organizations across SoCal to build out this coalition. And so far, what we've really been able to do is lay out, we're very new, so we're still very much starting our work, but lay out our research and education. We have actually an educational discussion tomorrow night on Anduril out of the Philippines. We are also laying out our legislative work, seeing who in our own cities can we target that are responsible for allowing Anduril to operate, understanding their interests, and also thinking about like the local Congress people that we could target, either friendly or antagonistic, to put pressure on slowing down or completely stopping the building of Anduril's manufacturing site in Long Beach. And then are also demanding the different universities across Southern California, uniting with STEM students to really expose what Anduril and these military manufacturers are doing and what they're getting students to do, in developing these weapons. And so really calling on the universities to cut ties with Anduril and also demand for Anduril to shut down. So those are some of the initial things that we've really been able to work together on for our campaign.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just
Go
gonna
ahead,
add
Bob.
a quick bit in Seattle. Um, in Seattle, like I highlighted, we're really thinking about the environmental approach and knowing that that hits very strongly with people. We're doing a lot of records requests and trying to understand what's going on legally and what avenues we have to do legal challenges. I think many environmental people here know that like environmental impact review can be delaying to allow train up in like positive environmental projects. So think about those avenues. And we are actually like planning on talking and meeting with the neighbors who live near the site to be like, hey, you should know about this, you should care about this, and trying to build like public sentiment around getting them out of the city, which we actually got in large part thanks to working with Tala and Darren, who gave us advice on this kind of stuff. So really also another avenue is like we're just trying to build connections around the US and like learn from people and have a coordinated fight against this evil company.
Yes, and that brings up that if anybody here is interested in joining us, please sign up. Sign up with Anita and let us know that you're interested in expanding this our nuclear opposition, Anduril opposition across the country and around the world. And also, so locals have an uphill battle, but they are still fighting to against the zoning that was allowed to build Anduril and some of the things they want to build down there in central Ohio. And not only that, but in Colorado, the citizens actually chased Anduril out, at least for now. Anduril is gone
Yay!
from from two different locations that they wanted to be in Colorado. So it's not impossible.
And on that note, thank you to all of you for sharing your information with us. Okay, so I guess that wraps up our presentation today. Thank you to everybody for coming and for what you all do.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.